It was supposed to be a negotiation tool, a way to pressure Europe back to the table. But when President Trump slapped a sudden 25% tariff on European car imports, he didn't just raise taxes on luxury sedans. He detonated a bomb beneath the global economy. And the shockwaves didn't take long to hit. Within hours, European leaders convened emergency meetings. Days later, the EU launched a precise surgical counterstrike, one that didn't just target American industries, but targeted Trump's political heartland. Soja, beef, bourbon, tractors. Everything made in Republican voting districts was now in the crosshairs. This wasn't trade policy anymore. This was warfare. But what if this isn't about cars at all? What if this is the moment when the US actually loses its grip on global trade and China swoops in to replace it? In this video, let's break open what's happening and what's coming next. Donald Trump didn't return to the White House with a whisper. He returned with a punch. Within weeks of reclaiming power, the US trade playbook was rewritten in ink darker and bolder than ever before. No diplomacy, no buffer zone, just a 25% tariff slapped across the entirety of European automobile imports. It wasn't a bargaining chip. It was a declaration of economic war. The White House painted the move as a matter of national survival. Trump himself spoke of unfair subsidies, decaying manufacturing towns, and the sacred duty of bringing industrial strength back to American soil. The logic was classic Trump: provoke a crisis, force negotiation, and rally a domestic base around economic nationalism. "We will build our cars in Detroit, not Dusseldorf," he proclaimed, drawing cheers from crowds and groans from economists. But beneath the populist roar, reality stirred. The US auto industry is deeply entangled with Europe. American factories rely on precision transmissions from Germany, luxury electronics from France, and mechanical components from Italy. Trump's tariff didn't just penalize foreign companies. It cornered American ones that can't produce those parts domestically at scale. Ford, General Motors, and Tesla were all now staring down the barrel of higher costs, disrupted production lines, and angry shareholders. And the global market noticed. European automakers saw their stocks plunge. US dealerships warned of price hikes on everything from sedans to SUVs. Even Wall Street paused. Because what Trump called an economic revival, others began calling it a self-inflicted wound. Still, Trump's camp didn't blink. The goal, they said, wasn't just to bring back factories. It was to break a system that had let Germany flood the US with premium cars while American manufacturers were being penalized abroad. But this wasn't just a tariff. It was a message, one Trump believed Europe couldn't ignore. He was wrong. Europe didn't plead. It hit back. Within 48 hours, the European Commission unveiled a brutal retaliation. $26 billion worth of tariffs targeting US exports. But these weren't just economic strikes. They were political assassination attempts, meticulously aimed at the nerve centers of Trump's voter base. Brussels had done its homework. The counter-tariffs zeroed in on soybean exports from Louisiana, beef from Nebraska, poultry from Alabama, whiskey from Kentucky, and farming equipment from Iowa. All of them came from red states. All of them employed thousands. All of them voted for Trump. This wasn't a trade policy, it was a battlefield strategy. In Brussels, the EU declared, "We are not America's colony. If Trump wants a trade war, we will make sure it costs him votes, not just money." This echoed across the Atlantic like a cannon blast. For European officials, this wasn't just about defending exports. It was about defending sovereignty. And if that meant helping unseat Trump, so be it. The pressure began to show. American farmers, already reeling from Chinese tariffs during Trump's first term, now found themselves boxed in by allies. Corn and soy prices dipped. Orders from European buyers stalled. Equipment dealers in the Midwest reported canceled contracts. The agricultural lobby, usually a Republican fortress, began sending warning memos to the White House. Meanwhile, Republican lawmakers in tariff-struck districts scrambled to contain the fallout. Senators called for urgent trade talks, while governors in Iowa and Kansas demanded carve-outs. But in Trump's view, the pain was part of the plan. "This is the sacrifice we make for American greatness," he tweeted. But not everyone agreed, especially those watching their export markets vanish. And yet, the European counterstrike had only just begun. April loomed large. That's when the next phase of tariffs, targeting $19.6 billion more in U.S. goods, was scheduled to drop. But Brussels wasn't just reacting. It was repositioning, laying groundwork for something much bigger than tit-for-tat tariffs. It was redrawing the global map and turning America's allies into Asia's partners. When the first batch of tariffs hit European cars, the headlines were loud. But inside corporate offices in Detroit, Austin, and Fremont, something even more terrifying was unfolding. The supply chain was collapsing. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. American automakers weren't just losing access to foreign finished cars. They were losing access to parts. Ford relies on German-made gearboxes for several of its most profitable trucks. GM sources suspension systems from France. Tesla's European deliveries depend on high-efficiency battery modules from Italy. Suddenly, all of it, every screw, bolt, and chip, became 25% more expensive, or in some cases, stopped arriving altogether. Production lines slowed to a crawl. Some plants temporarily furloughed workers. Internal memos at two major auto firms, later leaked to financial outlets, warned of price increases of up to $6,000 per vehicle by Q3 2025. Dealers were told to brace for low inventories and irate customers. But if the situation at home was alarming, the view across the Atlantic was worse. The EU struck back with its own 25% tariff, not on parts, but on finished American vehicles. Ford's Edge SUVs, once a modest success in Germany, were suddenly too expensive to compete. Cadillac's luxury sedans, popular in select European cities, vanished from dealer lots. Tesla, whose Model Y had climbed to become a top-selling EV in parts of Europe, saw its market share evaporate in just 2 months. With Europe shutting its doors, automakers tried to reroute to Canada, to Mexico. But Trump's administration was already floating the idea of tariff expansions to those very regions, warning that tariff cheats wouldn't be tolerated. The uncertainty strangled investment. Several firms froze expansion plans. Others began moving component orders to Asia, a shift that would take years to fully implement and would come with its own complications. The promise to bring car jobs home was starting to look like a fantasy. In reality, American manufacturers were being isolated, stranded between retaliatory tariffs abroad and political chaos at home. And just as the wheels of the car industry slowed, the aftershocks began to spread far beyond the factory floor. American LNG producers, once hailed as Europe's saviors after the Russian energy divorce, found themselves frozen out of new long-term contracts. European governments, worried about future trade unpredictability, began shifting toward Qatar, Norway, and Australia. There was even talk of accelerating green hydrogen and solar partnerships within the EU to permanently reduce dependency on U.S. energy imports. Billions in potential revenue, years in the making, now hung in the balance. Meanwhile, the tech sector entered its own nightmare. European regulators had been holding back for years, wary of disrupting US-EU cooperation. But with the trade war in full swing, those gloves came off. New digital tax proposals re-emerged. Antitrust probes targeting Apple's App Store and Google's ad business were reignited. France, Germany, and the Netherlands began pushing for European tech sovereignty, a move that could lead to indigenous chip development, cloud infrastructure, and data standards designed to exclude American firms. Companies like Intel, Qualcomm, and NVIDIA, which rely heavily on European business clients, suddenly saw their strategic roadmaps crumbling. Tech giants were not just losing market access. They were now viewed as vectors of political risk. This wasn't about tariffs anymore. It was about decoupling, the intentional long-term shift away from American dependence. And while Washington fought fires, Beijing was already planning a rebuild. You see, the US-EU trade war wasn't just a disruption. It was an opening, and China stepped in with surgical precision. As Brussels scrambled to stabilize trade flows and insulate its industries, Beijing sent delegations, quiet, businesslike, and heavy on incentives. Europe didn't need to sign new alliances, not yet. All it had to do was leave the door open. And that's exactly what it did. And China offered the EU something America no longer could: predictability. It proposed joint EV development, easing of tech import restrictions, and most importantly, massive demand for European industrial machinery, medical equipment, and luxury goods. Even Huawei extended an olive branch to European telecom providers, offering deep discounts on next-gen 5.5G gear in exchange for pilot partnerships. European analysts began floating the unthinkable. What if China replaces the US as Europe's key trade partner? At the same time, other countries smelled opportunity. Japan and South Korea began expanding trade missions to Brussels. India pushed agricultural exports. Brazil offered soybeans. The very trade flows the US had cut off were now being absorbed by America's competitors. And the greatest irony? While America's tariffs were meant to hurt foreign economies and defend its own, they were instead forcing allies to forge new alliances. Global supply chains were realigning, not around Washington but away from it. In a matter of months, the United States, once the center of global trade, was watching the world reshape itself without its consent. What do you think? Why is Europe targeting Trump's voters, not just his policies, with precision economic warfare? Isn't it true that Trump's America First strategy is leading to America being completely alone? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on whether Trump will back down or continue in his ego and ruin America. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.